Hey everyone, Tony D with another hot take. Why does Trump keep winning? Well, it kind of occurred to me, and it goes along with things I've been saying about Trump. I keep saying a lot of times, he's at these press conferences and he's kind of the only adult in the room. I also kept telling you that the Democrats are so screwed up, let's say, that merely by being competent, Donald Trump is head and shoulders above most of the Democrats. And I think the real strategy behind his wins is that it's to look competent and put his opponents always on the defensive, reacting to things that where they should have common goals, right? So the immigration issue is a perfect example. Uh, for those of you who don't know, let me catch up the speed. So Biden tried to blast Trump with this new ad. Now it wasn't from the Biden campaign; it was actually from a PAC. But these PACs, it's not like they don't coordinate with the candidates, even though they're not supposed to. They totally do. Biden did not approve the message, but in the message, they said they repeated Trump's China ban let in 40,000 people, and so it's not a very good ban, and we think he should crack down harder, and he's not cracking down hard enough, and that's been repeated by the campaign separately and through the DNC sort of talking points and people in the media. Well, the response to that, Dan Crenshaw did a video, and the response is simple. 40,000 people who were let in were U.S. citizens and, people who basically live here or have spouses here, and they're supposed to come back. You can't trap U.S. citizens on foreign soil. That's the whole point of having a country. So you have to let if you have a passport, you have to be let back into your own country, especially in the United States. You can't leave people. This isn't communist China yet. So that was a disarming of it. But this idea that see, we're going to be tough on people like that, say the Democrats. Well, now Trump sort of shifted back the other way and said, okay, let's ban green cards for 60 days. And some of those 40,000 people were, green card holders. And those are people who are American citizens in all but name. They're either married to an American citizen and working here, and for whatever reason, they're not citizens. I'm not sure how that works. I guess because there's a time period you have to go through, or you got married outside the United States. I'm not sure how that all works. But yeah, I mean, there are some people who are in between transitioning to American citizenship, or they've just been here. They're still a citizen of their country, but they work in the United States most of the time. So they're essentially, I wouldn't say they're essentially Americans, but they're pretty close to it. I mean, they speak English. They probably speak it with not much of an accent. This is partly why that reporter who was killed by the Saudis, there was such an outrage. He was one of those guys. He was from the Saudi kingdom, but he spent most of his time in America writing articles for the Washington Post on behalf of the kingdom, but he lived like an American for most of his life, is my understanding. So by pivoting back, he's forced the Democrats. Well, he hasn't forced them, but the Democrats continually just knee-jerk reaction, always in the opposite direction of Trump. So they thought they caught him on this 40,000 people were let in, so they decided to hammer him. And then Trump just said a normal thing like, well, I'm going to suspend green cards for 60 days and give the workers in America a chance to catch up, which is a reasonable thing to say, even if you don't believe it, even if you think Trump's got some evil scheme. I mean, you have to admit that sounds very reasonable. So it doesn't sound reasonable for the Democrats then to pivot like 180 and then go back to, no, you should let everybody in. It's also true that something like close to 80% of Americans are fine with that. They're fine with Trump's ban on immigration for a while because of the virus and because of that very reason. So the Democrats are therefore pivoting back, but not as hard as they normally do. They're not calling him a racist. They're kind of, but not really. They're sort of doing it in a more opaque way as not to directly go after him. And again, this is part of Trump's winning strategy. You know, there's no reason to do anything extreme because if your opponents are going to call you extreme for doing normal things, they look stupid. They undermine their own credibility. This is partly why the reason that the Democrat-controlled media, or greatly influenced media, I should say, is taking it on the chin over and over again. The New York Times, MSNBC, and CNN. And even now, the New York Times, at least occasionally, is trying to be a slightly more balanced than they normally are. You know, push comes to shove, I think they'll keep supporting the Democrats and keep railing against Trump. But in a way, it doesn't matter. They've tainted their brand for a short-term gain. Now, I talked about this in my Disney rant about Star Wars toys, about how I think Disney has tainted their brand and continues to taint it. But to untaint your brand, you have to do positive, good things. But that takes a while to get the word out. When you've tainted your brand to the point that, you know, I used to watch CNN all the time. I used to put it on and let the news scroll go by and just leave it on in the background. I was like living in an airport here. Now, I mean, I got rid of my cable, but even if I still have it, you know, when I had it, I just didn't watch CNN. I mean, it was pointless after a while. They had gotten so many stories wrong, in my view. They had been so partisan, and they had cut so many corners. I have no interest in seeing anything that's on CNN anymore, or MSNBC. And, you know, Fox still has some amount of interest because they still do some news. Now, you can argue that's very partisan, and it is, but at least the partisan stuff is entertaining sometimes, and they do news all day. You know, MSNBC, like, I think closes down for the weekend just to post lockup videos and and TV shows that I have zero interest in. Same thing with, which, by the way, I think is counter to sort of a left-wing narrative of wanting to help prisoners when you have a TV show like Lockup that's essentially exploiting prisoners, in my view. Same thing with CNN. You've got these ridiculous shows about, you know, pseudo-documentaries about the 80s or the 60s, the 70s, Obama. It's like nobody wants to see those anymore. And, you know, nobody... And part of that is the credibility of CNN. They've tainted their brand to the point, you know, what would you rather watch? A documentary produced by, you know, documentary filmmakers that maybe you never heard of but have an interesting, you know, topic, or yet another CNN show touting their narrative that you already know by rote. Even the viewers of CNN are not going to watch that. And it shows in their ratings, in my view. They can't even get 1 million people. There are guys on the YouTubers, they have more than 1 million people. And now that YouTube is fronting for all these major media groups, I think it's doing more damage and therefore doing more damage to the Democratic brand as a whole. And Trump knows this. He's a master of optics. He is doing these tweets that get, I mean, when Trump is tweeting, first off, I'm trying to follow Trump's tweets as well because I'm trying to promote Wokistan, and I sometimes promote it underneath his tweets. and which ties because it ties into Wokistan because it takes place after Trump is reelected. So I'm hoping to sell a few books and get to the top of the response thread, but it's nearly impossible because the journalist blue check marks follow Trump just to rail against him in the thread the moment he tweets something. And literally within 15 minutes, there'll be 3,000 replies on the president's tweets. I mean, it's insane. If you don't hit it like within a few minutes, while I'm typing, I'm watching the number click up in the other window, and I'm trying to type in, my pitch for Wokistan, and I can't type it fast enough. I think the quickest I got it up there is under 1,000 replies. Like I got it in there, maybe like around 800 replies, but it's nearly impossible, and it's because the media has nothing to do, and the Democrats have nothing to do but react to Trump, and he knows that. So Trump just does normal things and lets the media overreact to it. Trump says something totally reasonable, and what are the headlines? Oh my God, what a tyrant. This guy's going to kill us all. But when you look at the headline or look at what he actually said, it just seems normal. It seems like something a president would say. It seems like a reasonable response to things. This is partly why the news people and the blue check marks on Twitter, most of whom are journalists, screamed, "You got to stop covering the president's press conference on the beer virus because that is spreading misinformation." No, that's absolutely not true. It's because everybody was watching it and they liked what they saw. They liked that the president would come out every day and update people about what's happening. And I like it too. And I watch the press conference every day. By the way, you can still watch it on some feeds on YouTube, and the White House has its own feed. You can watch it live, and it's fine. It's great. And look, you can make up your own mind if you think he's giving any misleading information. He brings experts out with him. He brings Dr. Birx and Fauci out, and some of the admirals doing the they're organizing the transport and moving respirators and things like that. And every day the reporters are there and they're asking him questions. And sometimes he rails back against them. And sometimes he rails against people or whatever. But for the most part, you feel that his response is mostly genuine. It's off the cuff. He's not using a teleprompter. Everything coming out of the Democrats is the opposite. It's all these measured responses that have been focus grouped and designed to get a specific reaction. But in order to do all that measured response stuff, it takes you forever because you have to go to a focus group and say, well, what do you think of this? Well, what does the average American voter think of this? 30% of them said this, 50% of them said that. Okay, let's say that. And by the time you do all that, it's like the news cycle moves too fast now. You can't respond that quickly. Trump just says stuff off the cuff. He's already a day ahead of the game. And part of his other strategy, where he seems to keep winning, is you have to understand how slow government response is. Trump is in the press conference every day. And when somebody says something like, sir, I got a call from a business owner. He can't open his business in this state. And he says it's because certain restrictions and he can't get a loan. Trump actually says, give me the name of that business owner and I'll look into it. And he has. He has done that on occasion and actually done things. That's why these governors can't help but praise Trump to a certain degree, because they call the White House and he's first off, they're meeting continually through Pence, because Trump just works and works and works, and he actually responds to them. He responds to their emails. He responds to their calls and requests for things. He goes, okay, you need that? All right, let me talk to somebody, blah, blah, blah. And that by itself is head and shoulders over most presidents. See, most presidents don't do that. And it has nothing to do with crisis or anything. It has everything to do with how Trump ran a business versus how bureaucrats respond to things. See, when you run a private business, it's not about the response, it's about the money. So if somebody says, well, sir, our hotels are missing towels. We're really running low on towels. Well, get the towel guy on the phone. Find out when we could get some towels and get them down there. That's how a businessman responds. But when you say to a bureaucrat, sir, we don't have enough, sterilized towels for the medical response team, the response is something like, well, who is authorized to do that, right? It's got to be like, well, who in the pipeline is responsible, and why didn't that happen? They're not overly concerned with the actually getting the towels to the people who need them. They're more concerned with how it's going to look, who did what, and how they can cover their ass, publicly, because that's how bureaucrats react to things. They don't react like, well, sir, you haven't gotten what you needed, therefore I failed you and I have to get it to you. They respond, well, sir, don't talk to me that way. You filled out the wrong form, therefore you're the one at fault, not me. And that's the problem with bureaucracies. It always has been. And this is what libertarians have been saying for years and years and years. Cut back on government, you cut back on the bureaucracy. Yeah, you might have to go to a private firm and you can still get screwed in a private firm, but at least you'll get screwed in an hour and be on your way. As opposed to government, who might take weeks to screw you over, and then you'll be like, I waited all this time. There's a bazillion examples, although I heard one today in the UK. They were talking about Tommy Robinson, and he is unfortunately caught up in his daughter got assaulted in a water park by some guy. He's trying to get the cops to arrest the guy and press charges against him, but the bureaucracy in the UK is so out of control. Tommy blew his lid and apparently assaulted the guy. They instantly investigated the assault and didn't instantly. They're only now interviewing the kids like 8 weeks later. And he played recordings of talking to the cops, and they're absolute bureaucrats over in the UK. Well, sir, that's not my department, or I wasn't there, so I can't give you an answer. Like that kind of dodging. Whereas if, imagine you went into a McDonald's and you said, I ordered a cheeseburger and you didn't put any cheese on my burger. And the guy just turned to you and said, well, sir, I'm not part of the cheese department. I can't help you. And then you were like, well, I want my money back. Well, sir, you're going to have to fill out a form. We normally don't give refunds here at McDonald's. I mean, you'd never go to McDonald's again. That's not how a private industry treats you. They treat you like, oh, I'm so sorry, sir. You didn't get cheese? Well, let me give you a free cheeseburger on the house and make things right. The reason they do that is because they want your business. It's not an altruistic reason, but it's a business reason. And that's how Trump tends to approach things. And that's why it's better. People say, oh my God, you run this country like a business, you're going to get everybody killed. No, you're not, because you don't kill your customers. You just don't. Now, you may exploit them, you may do other bad things to them, but you don't want them to die. You don't want them to get hurt. You want them to be happy with the service. So Trump wants you to be happy with his service. He can't help himself. That's what businessmen do. Now, is he a con artist that's, massaging the facts? Oh, absolutely. That's what even people in the private sector do. But at the end of the day, he understands there are certain things you cannot lie about. You can't hand somebody a hamburger and call it a steak. You just can't do it. When Trump says we have we have these respirators and they're the best in the world and they're made in good parts and blah, 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 blah. He partly that is just bluster and cheering the American worker, which is part of his platform. But part of that too is that he wants those parts to be good. He wants those respirators to be good, because if those respirators are poorly made, it's going to come back on him, and he knows that. And because it would come back on him at a company. you know, there was some stuff about Trump steaks not being very good, and now Trump steaks is gone. They don't make Trump steaks anymore because either he's going to make them right, or he's just going to say, well, that business didn't work. You know, we can't make that work unless we do it well. And that's how capitalism works. It's the same thing. You can apply those same rules to government, but you need a guy like Trump in order to apply it that way. Anyhow, I think that is a large part of his strategy and why he continues to win. Thank you for watching. Smash like and subscribe. Please check out my books, Woke Stand a Novel, and The Pineys, available ebook, trade paperback, Kindle Unlimited is free. Links in the description. And also check out the Webcomic Factory, a new webcomic every day at thewebcomicfactory.com.